What happened when an undercover CEO stepped into his own bike shop disguised as a trainee will absolutely restore your faith in honesty and leadership. Hey there, amazing listeners. You're the kind of people who still believe that character matters and that doing the right thing never goes out of style. Today's story is about quiet courage, ethical grit, and one young mechanic who stood up for what was right, even when no one was watching. Stick around, because what started as a simple act of kindness turned into a company-wide transformation you won't forget. Let's dive into this powerful journey together. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and sunscreen through the open doors of coastal cruisers, a beachside bicycle rental and repair shop nestled along the boardwalk in Santa Clara, California. Tourists in flip-flops milled about the front counter, looking for the perfect cruiser to ride along the shore, while locals wheeled in bikes with creaking brakes or stubborn gears. Behind the counter, the clang of a dropped wrench echoed through the repair bay. Business as usual, at least on the surface. That morning, a new hire had quietly joined the shop. He didn't speak much, didn't ask questions. Just grabbed a rag, rolled up his sleeves, and started wiping down workbenches like he'd been there for years. His name was Ethan, though no one used it much. Most assumed he was just another seasonal tech hired to keep up with summer demand. But they were wrong. Ethan Daly wasn't new to coastal cruisers. He owned it, or rather he used to. The company had been his passion project, a promise he made to an old friend before he passed. Keep the soul of the shop alive. But over time, he'd become a distant figure, letting regional managers handle operations while he chased expansion, until the complaints started. Overcharging, shady upsells, workers quitting mid-shift, so he came back, not in a suit, not with a press release, but in worn boots and grease-stained jeans, determined to see for himself what his company had become. As he swept the floor and watched from the shadows, one thing became clear: something was broken. And it wasn't just the bikes. The atmosphere was heavy, the employees quiet, the customers cautious. And at the center of it all, running the shop like a personal cash register, was Gavin Marsh, the branch manager. Ethan said nothing, for now, but he watched everything. In particular, he noticed one young man moving with quiet precision and the kind of work ethic you couldn't fake. Marco Reyes, barely 26, already carried himself like someone who cared more about doing the right thing than keeping his job. And Ethan had a feeling that before this summer was over, Marco was going to show him exactly what kind of man he was. The clatter of tools paused as the front door chimed, letting in a gust of warm, salty air. An elderly man, late 70s, stepped inside, wheeling an old steel-framed cruiser with worn white-wall tires and a frayed leather saddle. His sun-spotted hands trembled slightly as he gripped the handlebars. He wore a faded navy ball cap that read, USS Midway, a silent nod to his service. His voice was steady but soft as he approached the counter where Gavin Marsh, the shop manager, leaned with disinterest. "It's the belt, keeps slipping. I just need it replaced," the old man said. "I don't have the full amount today, but I can come back next week with the rest." Gavin didn't even look up. "No handouts," he muttered. "Pay in full or take it somewhere else." The words hung in the air like an insult. The old man didn't argue. He just stood there, hands still on the bike, too proud to beg but too tired to protest. That's when Marco Reyes, nearby in the service bay, straightened up. His hands were stained with chain grease, his shirt damp with sweat. He looked from Gavin to the veteran and then back again. "I'll take care of it," Marco said, stepping forward. Gavin's expression twisted. "Out of your check, then." Marco didn't flinch. "Fine." Gavin snorted and turned away, unconcerned. Marco wheeled the cruiser into the bay and got to work. It took him less than 10 minutes, belt off, new one on, tension adjusted, quick, clean, precise. The old man tried to hand him a crumpled $5 bill. Marco shook his head. "Just ride safe, sir." From across the room, Ethan watched the entire exchange in silence. The gesture wasn't loud or grand, it wasn't for show, but in that small moment of quiet decency, choosing compassion over policy, Ethan saw a flicker of what his company used to stand for. And in Marco, he saw something even rarer, an employee who still believed in doing right, even when no one was watching. Just before lunch, the sun was high and the boardwalk was buzzing when a young woman in her early 30s pushed a bright blue beach cruiser into the shop, its chain clicking loudly with each step. She wore a faded apron over yoga pants, her eyes tired behind smudged sunglasses. "I think something's wrong with the gears," she said, voice tight. "I just need a quick look. I've got to be back at the cafe by 1. Before Marco could speak, Gavin stepped in, already circling the bike like a shark. "Inspection fee's $80, 0 cents non-refundable, that's shop policy." The woman blinked. "80? Just to look?" Gavin shrugged. "You want free, try YouTube." Her jaw clenched, but she stayed. Marco gently took the handlebars. "Hang on a sec," he said, kneeling down to check the derailleur. A few seconds in, he spotted a stretched chain, dry as dust. "You don't need a replacement. Just needs oil and a tension tweak. Shouldn't be more than $6 at the hardware store." The woman's shoulders dropped in relief. "Seriously?" Marco nodded. "Go grab it. I'll show you how to fix it in 2 minutes." Gavin's voice sliced through the moment like a whip. "Marco, a full derailleur replacement is $120, 0 cents. We bill that or we don't touch it." Marco stood, wiping his hands calmly. "I'm not going to lie to her." Gavin's face turned red. "You want to get fired over $6. Marco didn't back down. "I want to sleep at night." The woman gave Marco a grateful smile, then left, avoiding Gavin's glare on the way out. Ethan, watching quietly from the service bay, took a slow breath. That wasn't just decency, that was resistance. Marco had just crossed a line, and Ethan knew exactly what kind of manager would punish someone for telling the truth. The stakes were rising, and so was Marco's quiet courage. After the rush quieted and the smell of chain lube gave way to the scent of boardwalk tacos drifting in from outside, Ethan slipped into the back office under the guise of organizing parts. He closed the door behind him, not to hide, but to think. The dingy desk, cluttered with outdated invoices and mismatched tools, was a far cry from the clean conference tables and Zoom meetings he'd grown used to. Pulling out his personal laptop, he opened a file labeled Customer Escalations, Santa Clara. Complaint after complaint scrolled past. Upcharges, missing parts, aggressive service, pressure, all things he once promised would never happen under his brand. His gaze drifted to a photo pinned on the corkboard, a grainy shot of the original shop founders, back when the business was just one location and still called Wheelhouse Brothers. His late best friend Sam grinned in the picture beside him, holding a wrench like a scepter. They'd built this place with a simple dream: honest work, fair prices, and trust you didn't have to ask for. Somewhere along the line, Ethan had let it slip away, delegating too much, trusting the wrong people, thinking numbers told the whole story. But numbers never told you when a manager humiliated a vet or tried to scam a single mom. People did if you showed up and listened. A muffled laugh brought him back. Through the cracked blinds, he saw Marco outside, helping a kid fix a bent pedal. No charge. Just a patient hand, showing him how to tighten the bolt. Ethan's jaw tensed. This is what the company was supposed to be. And if he had to burn down every branch to rebuild it the right way, he would. Because Marco wasn't just a good worker. He was a mirror, showing Ethan everything he'd forgotten to protect. The next morning brought a different kind of heat, not from the sun but from the tension that rolled in with a sharply dressed man pushing a sleek Renault Cruiser, frustration practically radiating off him. Ethan, organizing tire racks in the corner, paused as the man strode to the counter with a folded receipt clenched in one hand. Gavin barely glanced up from his energy drink. "Something wrong?" he asked, tone already defensive. "Yeah," the man said tightly. "I brought this in 3 days ago. Paid for a new brake system, pads, housing, the works. Took it to another place back home. Guess what? Original parts, nothing replaced." He slapped the receipt down. Gavin's smirk didn't even crack. "That's not possible. We log all work." "Then show me," the man said. "I want to see my service records." Gavin's eyes narrowed. Company records aren't open to the public, especially not when you're flinging accusations. Marco, halfway through truing a wheel, straightened. His gaze shifted from the customer to Gavin, jaw tight. Ethan watched closely, noting the flush in Marco's cheeks, the slight shake of his wrench. He was waiting for someone, anyone, to step in. But no one did. The tourist crossed his arms. "You people charged me $600, and you're telling me I have no way to verify it?" Gavin shrugged. "You signed off." That's when Ethan moved. Calmly, steadily, he stepped forward and spoke for the first time all day. "Actually, he does have a way." Gavin turned. "Excuse me?" "He has a right to the work he paid for," Ethan said. "And to the records showing it." The customer blinked. "And who are you?" Ethan's gaze was firm, voice steady. "Ethan Daly, I own this shop." For a moment, the room froze. A wrench clattered to the floor. Gavin's jaw slackened. Marco's eyes widened slightly, realization washing over his face. The quiet man in grease-stained boots wasn't just another mechanic. He was the one person Gavin had never expected to face. The man who could shut him down. Silence hung in the air like fog after Ethan's reveal. No one moved. Gavin, usually brash and unbothered, looked like a man cornered for the first time in years. His mouth opened, reaching for his usual smirk, but nothing came out. "You're the owner?" he finally said, half laughing. "Come on, this has to be a joke." Ethan didn't flinch. "No joke, I started this business. I built it with a man who believed in honest work, not bottom-feeding scams." He turned to the tourist. "You'll get a full refund. I'll personally audit your ticket. And the last 6 months' worth while I'm at it." Gavin scoffed. "Look, this is all just a misunderstanding. The guys do the work. I don't micromanage every bolt." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "But you do set the tone. And I've watched you intimidate employees, price gouge customers, and lie to their faces. That's not a misunderstanding, that's management malpractice." He turned to Marco, who stood stiffly at the service bench, watching it all unfold. "How long have you been here?" Ethan asked. 3 years, Marco replied quietly. "Ever get promoted?" "No." Ethan nodded slowly, then looked back at Gavin. "And yet he's the only one here who still has a shred of integrity." Gavin's face turned red. "You're making a mistake." Ethan met his gaze squarely. "No, you did. And now you're done." The words hit like a hammer. Gavin sputtered, but Ethan was already turning away. "Clean out your station. You're no longer employed by Coastal Cruisers." The stunned employees stood frozen as the boss they feared was walked out by the very man they didn't realize had the power to do so. Ethan turned back to Marco. "You ever thought about running this place?" Marco blinked. "What?" "I need people who know right from wrong. People who don't look the other way." Marco hesitated, heart pounding. "Yeah, I've thought about it." Ethan nodded. "Good, because starting today, this shop's under new management." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the garage, but Marco didn't hear them. His eyes locked on Ethan, and for the first time since taking the job, he felt something more powerful than fear. Possibility. The following morning, Marco arrived at the shop earlier than usual, the cool coastal air still heavy with the scent of sea salt and change. His steps felt heavier, more deliberate, not from dread, but from the weight of new responsibility. Ethan was already there, clipboard in hand, reviewing inventory logs and customer histories. He barely looked up as Marco approached. "Sleep much?" he asked, scribbling a note. "Not really," Marco admitted. Ethan gave a short nod as if that was expected. "Big day." By mid-morning, the rest of the crew had filtered in, each casting sideways glances at the vacant manager's office and the unexpected calm that had replaced the usual morning bark from Gavin. When the last wrench was hung, Ethan gathered them near the workbenches. "Here's the deal," he began, his voice even but firm. "Gavin's gone. If any of you were pressured into upcharging or cutting corners, now's the time to speak up. No punishment if you come clean, but if you keep doing things his way, you won't last long." The silence that followed was thick with tension, then relief. A few mechanics exchanged glances. One young tech raised his hand. I was told to push new pedals when all they needed was a bolt. I didn't want to, but..." Ethan nodded. "Thanks for saying so. That ends today." He turned to Marco. "This shop needs someone who's not afraid to stand up for customers, someone who leads by example." Marco's eyes widened slightly. "You mean me?" "Already started yesterday," Ethan replied. "Now it's official." The crew let out a collective breath. Some clapped, one even grinned. For the first time in a long while, the shop didn't feel like a pressure cooker. It felt like a workplace, a team, a place where doing the right thing wasn't punished, it was promoted. As Ethan handed Marco the clipboard, it wasn't just a gesture. It was a passing of the torch, and a promise that this shop would be different from the inside out. As the sun dipped low over the Santa Clara boardwalk, casting long shadows across the shop floor, Marco wiped down the workbench one last time. The usual end-of-day routine felt different now, more deliberate, more meaningful. Tools weren't just being organized, they were being respected. Every rag folded, every drawer shut, echoed the quiet pride of someone who'd earned more than just a title. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was the one setting the tone. In the doorway, Ethan leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had finally done what needed to be done. "You thinking about walking away from all this?" he asked, not unkindly. Marco didn't look up. "Not a chance." Ethan smiled. "Didn't think so." There was a pause before Marco glanced over, curiosity sharp in his eyes. "You really own every one of these shops?" Ethan nodded. "All 6. But I haven't been in them like this for years." "That's going to change." Marco exhaled slowly. "It needs to." He turned back to the bench, running his hand across the cool metal. People stopped believing anyone up top gave a damn. Ethan nodded again, more solemn this time. "Then let's show them we do." As they locked up together, the night breeze swept through the alley, crisp and clean. The building behind them looked the same, but inside, something had shifted. Trust had been restored, not through policy, but through people. And that, Ethan knew, was how it should have been all along. The story of Marco and Ethan teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, integrity, and the quiet strength of doing the right thing, even when it costs you. At its core, it reminds us that the heart of any business isn't found in profit margins or spreadsheets, but in the people who show up every day with honesty and pride in their work. Marco, a young mechanic, didn't need a title to act like a leader. He saw wrong and refused to be part of it, and Ethan, a CEO who had grown distant, learned that real oversight isn't about delegation, it's about presence. By stepping into his business and witnessing the truth firsthand, he reclaimed his company's soul. The lesson is clear. True change doesn't start with grand gestures or corporate memos. It starts with one person refusing to compromise their values. And when leadership recognizes and uplifts that kind of character, entire cultures can shift. This story isn't just about a shop, it's about rebuilding trust, one act of courage at a time. Whether you're an employee or an executive, your choices ripple outward. And sometimes, doing the right thing in the smallest moment can spark a transformation that reaches everyone.